The mechanic was a simple man who lived in a small town where everyone knew each other. His garage stood at the corner of a busy street. It was not a fancy place, but it was always full of cars, bicycles, and even old trucks that needed repairing. People came to him because they trusted his hands. He had no big machines or modern equipment, but his skills made him different. He could listen to the sound of an engine and almost immediately understand what was wrong. Life had not been easy for him. He earned just enough to pay his rent, buy food, and keep his tools in good condition. Many times he had to repair cars for free because some customers could not pay. Still, he never refused to help. People sometimes asked him why he worked so hard when he gained so little. His answer was always the same. As long as I can fix something and make someone happy, I feel rich. This attitude made him loved in the community. Children liked to stop by his garage to watch him work. He often gave them small toys made from spare parts like a spinning wheel or a tiny car. Adults respected him, even if they sometimes felt sorry for his poor earnings. But the mechanic never complained. His heart was bigger than his pocket. One afternoon, when the sun was low and golden rays spread across the street, he noticed a little girl sitting quietly on a chair outside her home across the road. She was about 7 years old, with bright eyes and a gentle smile. But unlike the other children, she never joined in their games. While the boys played football and the girls jumped rope, she only watched. The mechanic saw her many times after that, always sitting, always silent. At first, he thought maybe she was shy, but later he learned the truth. She was paralyzed and could not walk or run like the others. Her parents took care of her with love, but there was little they could do to change her condition. This touched the mechanic's heart in a way he could not explain. Every time he saw the girl watching other children, something inside him ached. He imagined how hard it must be for her to want to play but not be able to. Her smile was soft, but her eyes carried a quiet sadness. That night, as he closed his garage, he kept thinking of her. He lay on his bed staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. He thought of his own childhood, running barefoot on dusty streets, making toy cars from wood, and racing with his friends. Those were the happiest days of his life. And here was a little girl, robbed of such joys, just watching the world pass by. The next morning he woke with a strange idea. What if he could make something for her? Not just a toy, but something that would allow her to move. Something that would give her the feeling of freedom. The thought stayed in his mind all day as he repaired a customer's van. Each time he tightened a bolt or replaced a wire, he wondered how he could create a little car for the girl. It sounded impossible at first. He had no extra money to buy new materials, and building such a thing would take time he barely had. But his determination was stronger than his doubts. He told himself, "If I can fix broken cars, why can't I build a small one for her?" In the following days, whenever he found a spare part that was not needed, he put it aside. A small wheel here, a piece of metal there, a broken battery that could still hold some charge. Slowly, a corner of his garage began to look like a collection of forgotten treasures. While working on normal jobs during the day, his mind was busy designing the mini car in silence. He imagined how it should look, how it should move, and how she could control it without using her legs. Every idea filled him with excitement. He did not tell anyone about his plan. It was his secret dream, something only his heart knew. One evening, when the neighborhood grew quiet, he stayed in his garage long after closing hours. The air smelled of oil and grease, and only a single lamp lit his workspace. He held 2 small wheels in his hands, studying how they could be attached to a frame. His hands were rough and tired, but his eyes glowed with hope. As he worked, the girl's face kept coming to his mind. He remembered her smile when she saw other children play. He wanted to give her not just a smile, but laughter. Laughter that came from feeling included, from moving, from being free. Days turned into weeks. The mechanic worked during the day for his customers and at night for the girl. He grew more tired, his back aching, his hands stained with grease, but he did not stop. Whenever he felt exhausted, he pictured her face and found new energy. Some people in town noticed his late-night work. They wondered what he was building. A few even laughed, saying, "He can barely afford to eat and he's wasting time on useless things." But the mechanic never answered them. He kept his head down and continued his secret mission. One afternoon, while he was welding 2 pieces of metal, he heard the children laughing outside. He walked to the door of his garage and saw the paralyzed girl sitting as always. The wind blew gently, lifting her hair. She smiled at the others, but he noticed the small flicker of longing in her eyes. At that moment, he silently promised himself, "I will finish it. She will not just watch, she will join." That night, as he tightened the final screws on a small frame, his heart raced. It was not ready yet, but he could already see the shape forming. A little car, strong enough to carry her, small enough for her to control. The mechanic wiped his sweat and looked around his messy garage. Broken tools lay scattered, old tires leaned against the wall, and wires hung from the ceiling. But in the middle of all this chaos stood something beautiful, hope in the form of a mini-car. For the first time in a long while, he felt like his work meant more than money. This was not just about fixing machines. This was about fixing a heart. And so the humble mechanic's simple life began to change, though he did not know it yet. What started as a quiet idea in the dark would soon grow into a story that touched not just the girl, but many more lives. The idea of building a mini-car for the paralyzed girl had already taken root in the mechanic's heart, and now it refused to leave him. Day by day, it grew stronger. He began to see the project not just as a gift, but as a mission, something he was meant to do. Every morning after opening the garage, he worked on customers' vehicles. He fixed flat tires, changed old engines, tightened loose brakes, and dealt with every little problem that came through his door. People depended on him, and he never turned them away. But inside his mind, another project was always alive. As soon as the customers left and the garage grew quieter, he would return to his secret collection of parts piled in the corner. The problem was, building a mini car was not as simple as fixing one. A broken car already had a structure. He just had to bring it back to life. But here he was starting from nothing. He had to design, plan, and create everything with his own hands. There were no blueprints, no instructions. Only his imagination guided him. At first, he tried to draw on scraps of paper, but the drawings looked messy. Still, they gave him a sense of direction. He wanted the car to be small enough to fit the little girl, light enough so she could move it easily, but strong enough to carry her safely. It had to look nice too, something that made her proud, not embarrassed. The first challenge came when he realized he did not have enough money for certain important parts. Batteries, wiring, and special switches cost more than he could afford. He had just enough savings for his rent and food, and if he spent it all, he would risk his own survival. For a moment, doubt entered his heart. "Am I chasing an impossible dream?" he thought. But the image of the girl's face quickly erased his doubts. He reminded himself that happiness was not measured in money. Even if he went hungry, the thought of her smile would fill him with strength. So he decided to continue, even if it meant struggling. Slowly, he began collecting what he needed. Whenever a customer brought in an old car part they no longer wanted, he quietly asked if he could keep it. Most people agreed, not knowing what he was planning to do with them. He salvaged wires, bolts, switches, and broken frames, storing them in his little workshop like precious treasures. Some evenings, the mechanic stayed at the garage so late that neighbors passing by wondered why his lights were still on. From outside, they could hear the sound of hammering, welding, and drilling. Some thought he was working on a special order for a wealthy client. Others joked, maybe he's building a spaceship. They laughed, but he never bothered to explain. The work was exhausting. After a full day of repairing vehicles, his body longed for rest, but his heart pushed him to keep going. His hands often shook from tiredness, and sometimes sparks from the welding machine burned tiny holes in his shirt. But he continued because he was not just building a machine, he was building hope. At times things went wrong. One night, after hours of assembling the small frame, he discovered it was too heavy. If the girl tried to use it, she would not be able to move it at all. His heart sank. For a few minutes, he sat on a stool with his head in his hands, feeling defeated. He thought of giving up. But then he remembered the sadness in the girl's eyes when she watched others play. That memory gave him the courage to try again. He dismantled the heavy parts and searched for lighter alternatives. It took him more time, more effort, but he refused to quit. The days turned into weeks, and word began to spread in the neighborhood that the mechanic was working on something strange. People teased him. "You can barely pay your bills, and here you are wasting time on a toy car," one man said. Another added, "Do you think that will change the world?" The mechanic never answered back. He simply smiled and returned to his work. Inside, he carried a secret that no one else could understand. The secret of love for a child he barely knew. but whose happiness had become his purpose. Despite the criticism, there were small moments that gave him strength. One evening, when he was testing a set of small wheels, the girl happened to pass by in her wheelchair, pushed by her mother. She stopped and watched him curiously. The mechanic quickly covered the wheels with a cloth so she wouldn't guess what he was building. The girl smiled politely and said, "Good evening, Uncle." Those simple words filled him with warmth. He knew he was on the right path. The biggest challenge came when he tried to figure out how the girl would control the car. Since her legs could not move, he had to design a system that worked with her hands. He tried attaching ropes to the wheels, but that failed. He then thought about using a joystick made from an old gear lever. After several attempts, he managed to connect the lever to the motor in a way that allowed simple forward, backward, and turning motions. It was not perfect, but it was something. The first time he tested it, the little car moved clumsily across the floor of the garage. It was slow and it shook as if it might collapse any second, but to the mechanic it was a miracle.
He clapped his hands together and laughed like a child.
For the first time, he truly believed his dream could come alive. Still, there were more problems ahead. The battery he had was old and weak. The car would move for a few minutes before stopping. He had no money to buy a new one. For several days, he searched junkyards and repair shops asking if they had anything he could use. Finally, he found an old but workable battery in a scrap shop. He bargained with the shopkeeper and managed to take it home for a low price. At night, when the rest of the town slept, his garage became alive with the sound of tools and the glow of sparks. The mechanic worked tirelessly, tightening bolts, adjusting wires, and painting the frame. He wanted the car to look bright and cheerful, not just a pile of scrap metal. He painted it in red and white, colors he thought the girl would love. As the project neared completion, he grew both excited and nervous. What if it failed? What if the girl could not use it? What if people laughed at him instead of appreciating his effort? These fears haunted him, but each time he looked at the car, he knew he could not turn back. One night, while testing the car again, he sat on the floor and imagined the little girl sitting inside it. He pictured her small hands on the lever, her face glowing with joy as she moved forward. That image became his fuel, stronger than food, stronger than rest. By now, the mechanic's life had completely changed. He no longer worked just to survive. He worked to create happiness. The mini-car was still incomplete, but it was close. He could feel it in his bones. Soon he would be ready to reveal it to the girl. And though he did not know it yet, this act of kindness would soon ripple far beyond his small garage, leading to events that would change his life forever. The day finally arrived when the mechanic looked at the little car in his garage and knew it was ready. He had spent weeks pouring his heart and energy into it. Every nut, every wire, every piece of metal carried his care. The frame was small but strong, painted in cheerful red with a white stripe running across its sides. The wheels, though recycled, rolled smoothly after endless adjustments. And most importantly, the joystick worked. With a small push, the car moved forward. With a gentle pull, it reversed. Side movements allowed it to turn. It was simple but magical. That morning, the mechanic woke earlier than usual. He barely touched his breakfast because his stomach was filled with nervous excitement. He wanted everything to go perfectly. He wiped the car clean, polished the small headlights he had fixed at the front, and made sure the battery was fully charged. Then he stood for a while staring at his creation. For the first time, he felt truly proud, not because of his skill, but because of the joy it was about to bring. The sun was bright, and the neighborhood street was buzzing with children playing. The mechanic rolled the little car out of his garage, covering it with a cloth. He walked towards the house across the street where the paralyzed girl lived. Her parents were sitting outside enjoying the morning breeze. The girl, as always, was watching other kids play from her chair. When she saw the mechanic, her face lit up with a polite smile. She always respected him, calling him uncle whenever their eyes met. The mechanic greeted the parents and said, "I have something special for her. May I show it to her?" The parents looked surprised but nodded. The neighbors noticed the scene and grew curious. They gathered around, whispering to each other, wondering what the mechanic was up to this time. With careful hands, he pulled away the cloth, and the bright red mini-car appeared. Gasps of surprise filled the air. The children ran closer, their eyes wide with wonder. The girl stared at it in silence, her small mouth open. She could not believe what she was seeing. "This," the mechanic said softly, Is for you? The girl blinked, unsure if he was serious. For me? She asked in a trembling voice. Yes. He smiled warmly. This little car is made for you. You can drive it with your hands. Would you like to try? Her parents were speechless, their eyes welling with tears. They had never expected such a gift from anyone, let alone the humble mechanic who had so little himself. With the parents' help, the girl was gently lifted from her chair and placed inside the minicar. Her small hands touched the joystick nervously. The crowd of neighbors grew larger, all watching closely. For a moment, silence filled the street. Push it forward, the mechanic encouraged. The girl pressed the lever slightly and the car began to move, slowly at first, then smoothly across the ground. The girl let out a squeal of surprise and then burst into laughter. It was the first time anyone had heard such a pure, happy sound from her. The children cheered and clapped. The parents covered their faces, unable to hold back their tears. The mechanic stood to the side, his heart pounding with joy. He had imagined this moment many times, but the reality was even more powerful. Seeing her laugh, seeing her feel free, was worth every sleepless night and every struggle. The girl drove the little car around the street, turning left and right, giggling with excitement. Look, Mama. Look, Papa, she cried. Her parents nodded, their hearts too full to speak. For the first time, their daughter was not just watching other children play. She was part of the fun. Neighbors who once mocked the mechanic now stared in silence, ashamed of their words. Some whispered, "We thought he was wasting his time, but look at her now." Others clapped along with the children, unable to deny the beauty of the moment. The mechanic walked beside the car, guiding her when she turned too sharply, making sure she was safe. But in truth, she was already driving better than he expected. Her laughter filled the air, mixing with the cheers of children and the applause of adults. The whole street turned into a celebration, not of wealth or power, but of kindness and joy. After a while, the girl stopped the car and looked at the mechanic. Her eyes sparkled with tears, but her smile was wide. "Uncle," she whispered, "this is the best gift in the world." "Thank you." The mechanic knelt beside her and said, "Your smile is all I wanted. Promise me you'll enjoy it as much as you can." "I promise." She nodded firmly, her little hands holding the joystick with pride. The parents stepped forward, holding the mechanic's hands tightly. "We don't have words to thank you," the father said with a trembling voice. "You have given our daughter something we could never give her." "May God bless you," the mechanic shook his head humbly. "I only did what my heart told me to do." For the rest of that day, the mini car became the center of attention in the neighborhood. Children took turns walking beside the girl as she drove, cheering her on as if she was a champion racer. The parents brought out juice and snacks for everyone, turning the moment into a small celebration. Even those who had once doubted the mechanic came forward to congratulate him. But for the mechanic, none of that mattered as much as the little girl's laughter. Each time she smiled, it erased the weeks of struggle, the nights of exhaustion, and the doubts he had faced. Her happiness was his true reward. As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, the mechanic returned to his garage. He sat on his stool, his clothes still stained with grease, but his heart was lighter than ever. He had not earned a single coin from this project, but he felt richer than he ever had in his life. For the first time in years, he believed that his work meant more than fixing cars. He had fixed a heart, lifted a spirit, and given a child a taste of freedom. He whispered to himself, "This is why I was given these hands." What he did not know was that this single act of kindness was about to ripple far beyond his small neighborhood. Somewhere in the crowd, someone had recorded the girl driving her new car on their phone. That video, filled with her laughter and the mechanic's humble smile, would soon travel farther than he could ever imagine. And just a few days later, a mysterious limousine would arrive at his garage, carrying news that would change his life forever. The morning after the little girl received her mini car, the neighborhood was still buzzing with excitement. People who had once doubted the mechanic were now talking about his kindness with admiration. The children could not stop telling their friends at school about the magical little car that one of their neighbors had built. And the parents of the girl were overwhelmed with gratitude, speaking to everyone about how their daughter now laughed freely, something she had not done in a long time. But for the mechanic, life went back to its usual rhythm. He returned to repairing cars, patching tires, and checking engines. He was not the kind of man who expected fame or reward. For him, the smile of the girl had been enough. He felt his purpose had been fulfilled. Still, he noticed something unusual. Strangers began to appear around his garage. Some would stop by, pretending to ask about repairs, but he caught them looking at the little car parked at the girl's home. Others would whisper among themselves while pointing at him. He found it strange, but he did not pay much attention. He thought it was just curiosity. What he did not know was that the video recorded by a neighbor had already spread beyond the town. It had been shared on social media, where thousands of people watched the paralyzed girl driving her minicar and laughing with pure joy. People were touched by the mechanic's selfless act. Comments poured in, words of admiration, prayers, and appreciation. The video traveled far, reaching even the screens of people in big cities and then, eventually, to the office of someone very powerful. 3 days later, something happened that the mechanic would never forget. It was a quiet afternoon. The sun was high and he was busy repairing the engine of an old truck when he heard a strange sound outside. It was the low, smooth hum of a vehicle, unlike the noisy cars he usually heard in his town. He wiped his hands with a cloth and stepped out of the garage. To his surprise, a long black limousine had stopped right in front of his small workshop. Its shiny body reflected the sunlight and its tinted windows hid the people inside. The neighbors gathered immediately, whispering in amazement. No one in that small town had ever seen such a car before. Children ran to the street pointing at it with wide eyes. The mechanic stood still, confused. Why would such a luxurious car come here to his humble garage? The back door opened slowly and a man in a perfectly pressed suit stepped out. He was tall, confident, and carried himself with an air of authority. The neighbors fell silent, watching with curiosity. The man looked around and then walked straight toward the mechanic. "Are you the one who built the small car for the little girl?" the man asked politely. The mechanic nodded, still unsure what was happening. "Yes, sir. I made it for her." The man smiled. "Good. Then I'm speaking to the right person. May we talk?" The mechanic led him into the garage, still feeling nervous. Inside, the man looked around at the simple tools, the old parts stacked on shelves and the floor stained with grease. He seemed impressed. "My name is Mr. Kareem," the man introduced himself. "I work with a foundation that supports children with disabilities. We saw the video of the car you built. It touched us deeply." The mechanic blinked in shock. He had no idea that his small act had reached so far. "A video?" he asked quietly. "Yes," Mr. Kareem nodded. "The video has been seen by thousands, maybe even millions of people. Everyone is talking about your kindness and skill. That is why I am here. The foundation I represent wants to help you do more of this." The mechanic's hands trembled slightly. He could not believe what he was hearing. For years he had struggled just to survive. And now, someone was offering him an opportunity to do something greater. Mr. Kareem continued, "We believe that what you did for that little girl can be done for many more children. There are countless boys and girls who cannot walk, who feel left out of life. If you could build more of these cars or similar mobility devices, you could change their lives. The foundation is ready to provide you with funding, tools, and a proper workshop." The mechanic stared at him in disbelief. The words sounded like a dream, something too good to be true. "But I'm just a small-town mechanic," he said softly. "I have no big machines, no modern knowledge. I only know how to fix cars with what I have." "That's exactly why we chose you," Mr. Kareem replied warmly. "Because you don't wait for big machines or wealth. You use your heart, and that is something money cannot buy." Tears welled up in the mechanic's eyes. All his life people had overlooked him, calling him ordinary or poor. But now someone was telling him that his heart and hands could change the world. Outside, the neighbors grew restless, trying to peek into the garage. Rumors spread quickly. Some said the mechanic was being offered a job in the city. Others whispered that he had invented something amazing. The children pressed their faces against the windows, curious about the mysterious visitor. Inside, Mr. Kareem pulled out a folder and placed it on the workbench. Inside were documents explaining the foundation's plan. They wanted to build a partnership with the mechanic, providing him with materials, assistance, and a proper space to create mobility devices for children. "You don't have to decide right now," Mr. Kareem said gently. "Take your time. But please know that we believe in you. What you did was not small, it was extraordinary. And with the right support, you can help many more children." The mechanic closed his eyes for a moment, overwhelmed by emotions. He thought of the little girl's laughter, the way her parents had cried with joy, and the way the neighborhood had celebrated. He imagined hundreds of other children experiencing that same happiness. The idea made his heart race. When he opened his eyes, he whispered, "If this will help more children smile, then I will do it." Mr. Kareem smiled and shook his hand firmly. "Then let's begin a new journey." The sound of applause startled them. They turned to see that the neighbors who had been watching from outside had begun clapping loudly. Word had spread, and now everyone was cheering for the mechanic. For the first time in his life, he was not just the man who fixed cars, he was a hero. That evening, as the limousine drove away, the mechanic sat quietly in his garage, staring at his hands. They were rough, scarred, and stained from years of hard work. Yet those same hands had created something that touched the world. And now, those hands were about to build a future far greater than he had ever imagined. But deep inside, he knew one thing clearly. He had not done it for recognition, money, or fame. He had done it for a little girl's smile, and that smile had opened a door he never thought existed. What began as a humble act of kindness was now turning into a mission that could change countless lives. And the mechanic, once an unnoticed man in a small town, was ready to step into this new chapter with the same humility, the same dedication, and the same heart that had started it all. After the visit from Mr. Kareem, the mechanic's life changed in ways he could never have imagined. The very next morning, he received a call from the foundation, offering him a place in the city where he could build a proper workshop. They promised to provide tools, materials, and even a small team of assistants. For a man who had spent his life in a humble garage, this felt like stepping into another world. But even with all the opportunities ahead, he remained humble. He did not rush into the city immediately. First, he wanted to make sure the little girl was comfortable and that her new mini car was safe. He visited her house every day, checking the car's condition and teaching her small ways to control it better. The girl's joy continued to grow, and each time she laughed, the mechanic felt renewed energy. That laughter had always been his motivation, and now it also became a symbol of the life-changing path he was about to take. Finally, the day came for him to move to the city. His neighbors gathered to say goodbye. Some of them had once doubted him, some had laughed, but now all of them were proud. Children waved as he packed the last few tools into his small truck. The little girl and her parents came to see him off. She gave him a small handmade card, with a drawing of herself driving the mini car and smiling. "Thank you, Uncle," she whispered, hugging him tightly. "You're welcome." "Little one," he replied, holding back tears. "Promise me you will always keep smiling." "I promise," she said, her eyes shining with happiness. The journey to the city was long. The mechanic stared out the window, thinking about his past life, the days of struggle, the nights he had worked alone in his garage, and the small town that had shaped him. He realized that every moment had prepared him for this. Every repaired car, every extra effort, every act of kindness had led him here. Upon reaching the city, the foundation guided him to the new workshop. It was a spacious building filled with modern tools, spare parts, and even computers for designing new mobility devices. For a moment, the mechanic felt overwhelmed. Everything was so big, so shiny, and so different from the small garage he had known all his life. He took a deep breath and reminded himself, "It's not the place, it's what I do here that matters." He began by training his assistants. Some had never worked on vehicles before, but they were eager to learn. The mechanic taught them patiently, showing them not only how to assemble machines but also how to care about the people who would use them. He emphasized that each device they built was more than metal and wires. It was hope, joy, and freedom for a child. The first project in the new workshop was, naturally, the little girl's mini car. They redesigned it, making it safer and more durable. She visited the workshop laughing as she sat in the upgraded car. It could move faster now, had better controls, and even a small horn that made her giggle endlessly. Watching her happiness, the mechanic felt a deep sense of accomplishment. Word about the workshop spread quickly. Parents from different parts of the city began visiting, bringing their children who needed assistance. The mechanic and his team worked tirelessly, building custom mobility devices. Every child who laughed while driving or moving in their new devices filled the mechanic's heart with joy. It reminded him of the reason he had started this journey, to bring freedom and happiness to children who were often left behind. The mechanic also received invitations to talk about his work. Foundations, schools, and local organizations wanted him to share his story. At first he hesitated, feeling that he was just a simple mechanic. But when he saw the impact his story had on people, how many were inspired to help others, he realized that telling it was part of his mission. One day, during a workshop event, the little girl came again with her parents. She now knew how to control her mini car perfectly. She drove around the workshop, waving to the children and even teaching some of them how to push the joystick. The mechanic watched with pride. The girl, once quiet and withdrawn, had grown into a confident little ambassador of joy. The mechanic often reflected on how a single act of kindness had transformed everything. A small humble idea, just to bring a smile to a child, had grown into a mission that touched hundreds of lives. He realized that life had a mysterious way of rewarding selflessness. His heart, which had guided him through all the struggles, was now leading him towards something bigger than he had ever imagined. The foundation also recognized the mechanic's talent and dedication. They arranged for him to meet engineers and designers who could help improve the devices further. Together they created new models, some with remote controls for children who could not operate them directly, and others designed to be lightweight for easy handling. Each success brought a new sense of purpose, not just for the mechanic but for the whole team. Despite the success, the mechanic never forgot his roots. He often returned to his small town to visit neighbors and the little girl. He told her stories of the new children he was helping, making her laugh with tales of kids learning to drive their new cars. She became the symbol of what one small act could achieve, and the mechanic always reminded himself that it had started with her smile. As months passed, the workshop grew into a thriving center. Children from across the country came to receive help. The media covered the story, but the mechanic never sought attention. He continued to work quietly, focusing on the happiness of the children. His fame, he realized, was a byproduct of his work, not the goal. The mechanic's life had changed completely. From a man struggling to make ends meet in a small garage, he had become the heart of a movement to bring joy and freedom to children with disabilities. His days were filled with purpose, his nights with planning new devices, and every moment carried meaning. Yet despite all the changes, the mechanic remained the same humble man. He still greeted people with a smile, still listened to their stories, and still treated every child with the care he had shown from the very beginning. He knew that what mattered most was not recognition, not money, but the lives he touched and the smiles he created. The little girl, now a confident and joyful child, continued to inspire everyone around her. She had learned that even someone small, even someone ordinary, could create extraordinary happiness, and the mechanic had learned that true success was measured not by wealth or fame, but by the love and hope one could give to others. In the end, the humble mechanic, his small hands once stained with grease and tired from endless nights of hard work, had created something far greater than he ever imagined. He had built not just a car, but a legacy, a proof that kindness, determination, and love could transform lives. And as he looked around the workshop, filled with children laughing, parents smiling, and his team working tirelessly, he whispered quietly to himself, "It all started with a little girl and a small dream. And now, look at what we have achieved together."